This week's episode was brought to you by the four-dimensional, three-eyed, two-claws, one-minded, no-mouthed creator race of aliens which rule over our destiny from hyperspace kingdoms unseen. If you too would like to help the whole rabbit keep beaming itself via laser array directly into the void of space, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where for just $5 you get 2 bonus stickers, all our extended episodes, and access to our Discord server. If you're interested in having your tarot cards read, or even learning tarot yourself, give our other tiers a try. So, prepare your brain to transduce low-frequency plasmatic vibrations, because this week we're taking a deep dive into the fertile imagination of Philip K. Dick, unfurling the mysteries surrounding his Enthusiasmos, which had resulted in V.A.L.I.S, the Exegesis, and spurned a wave of Gnostic futurism that has changed the face of science fiction, introducing Saint Sophia to an entire generation. So without further ado, thank you, and enjoy the show.
Buck, buck, bacaw. Buck, buck, bacaw. Bacaw. Bacaw.
This is a great sound check.
Said something, fuck the cow.
No, bacaw. Buck, buck, bacaw.
I wouldn't fuck an animal, but if I did, a cow would be my last choice.
It's a chicken noise.
Yeah, I know, I'm just saying.
But the cow is sacred.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It takes like fucking 5-pound shits.
It's yummy.
So thank you.
You know what the cow says in Germany?
What does it say in Germany?
Shazoo.
God damn it.
Oh.
Hello everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just commit ourselves to wearing one type of cloth and never eating California rolls again. No, we begin inducing low-frequency cosmic vibrations into our brain, breaking through to receive transmissions from an intergalactic communication satellite, beaming negentropic pentagopate beams directly into our pineal gland, because this week we're discussing how the Empire never ended. A look into the religious experience of Philip K. Dick as recorded in V.A.L.I.S and his Exegesis. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, and I'm joined this week by co-host Mari Sama, the Llama of Trauma.
Llama ding dong.
Sure. Welcome, Mari. How are you doing?
Okay. The llama of drama.
I just watched Color Out of Space, and I was traumatized.
Oh, well, that's not on me, though.
They were alpacas, though. And in that movie, there's pink beams from outer space that take over people's minds. Spoiler, I mean, it is Lovecraft. Aliens that break the continuity of time. All the things, except the good guy's the bad guy, and the bad guy's the good guy. So, without further ado, let us actually get to V.A.L.I.S by Philip K. Dick. What did you think of V.A.L.I.S, Mari? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was very stream of consciousness, because early on, he even slips up in the text and says I, or rather fat, and then he'll go back to saying we, the royal we. It seems to me like you're listening to a splintered personality narrate what's happened.
It's a little bit like Fight Club without the Nietzsche.
Oh, yeah. The narrator, which it actually seems to be a part of an aspect of the person's personality. And, you know, it's like, I thought it sounded like an autobiography written like a book.
And it is. He wrote this entire anthology called his Exegesis, explaining over and over and over what happened to him in 1974. Which we'll get into here in the show, but he wrote it in such voluminous fashion, in such schizophrenic, overabundance, that he had to turn it into a novel that people could actually read, and that is where V.A.L.I.S comes from. And it takes the most important parts of his exegesis, and it includes them within the context of this fiction, where he can make fun of himself, but also expand on the feeling that he got going through it, and the personal significance it had, and then the extra personal significance it had, like the global significance it had, like all wrapped up into one box, which makes it, for me, fascinating. And furthermore, I can relate to it because my experience of the Sophia, which I'm going to get into more in the second half of the show, mirrors what happened with Philip K. Dick to an uncomfortable level, where it makes me feel more comfortable talking about my own neuroses and delusions that came with my own spiritual experience.
Absolutely. Because the way he's a writer, that's his profession. He's so eloquent at putting it into words words. Like, it's nothing that I could ever come up with. And he even notes it like it's almost impossible to put into words, first of all. And that he would even channel in different languages that he didn't understand until he wrote it down. And somebody else saw it and was like, hey, this says some pretty cool shit. Where'd you learn that? He's like, I don't know.
Or other times they'll be like, oh, I got it from this book or this dictionary or this thesaurus. And that's what makes me think that this is this thing and it's bona fide. Because he had to do all this research before the internet because he'd get these visions or these ideas and then he'd have to look it up in a book or a library or whatever.
But it would correspond, which is very interesting. And I like that he wrote the way that he writes it down makes sense to me. And I've had these experiences, but I'm not very good with words. So I appreciate his efforts and I understand his struggle because I've probably gone through something similar as well.
This is the guy who wrote Blade Runner, Total Recall, Minority Report, and those are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. He sort of introduced that whole like alternative fascist America, what would happen if the Nazis won or if like Richard Nixon took over the country. He wrote that. That's his. And
do androids dream of electric sheep?
Yes.
Which is a precursor to Blade Runner, basically, where, like, do you deem an android a human, like a living thing, because it can think and execute plans to survive? Then doesn't that make it alive?
Well, the Jedi, or at least Luke Skywalker, consider them alive, so that's good enough for me. I don't seem to remember owning a droid. You don't own droids! They have free will. Okay, before I get into droid rights, let's begin with Philip K. Dick's religious experience. Now, Philip K. Dick, in Fight Club-esque fashion, splits himself into two, as Mari already brought up, between himself, Philip K. Dick, and this character named Fat, Horse Lover Fat. But we'll get into what that name means here in a minute.
I want to make an alter ego and just call her Fat. Just like, hey, Fat. Look here, Fat.
Fat has a nervous breakdown in 71 when his friend Gloria Knudsen asks him for a whole bunch of Nembatols. She wants these Nembatols so she can kill herself. But Fat is like, well, I have a few, but maybe not enough to kill yourself. If you come over, I'll give them to you. And she comes over and he's like, haha, I took them all. You want to go to the beach and smoke pot with me? And so she's like, They go to the beach and they smoke some pot and he talks her into staying over with him. He's like, if you're going to kill yourself, why don't you just live with me? It'll be cool. And he's thinking about getting laid. Well, he sends Gloria off to go get her stuff. And when she goes home, her mom's like, hey, you need to go to therapy. And when she goes to therapy, it's like some crazy experimental therapy where they're where they like break down your personality. And so she has like almost a gang stalking experience when she walks into the building where she bumps into somebody and they're like, oh, you're ugly, and it's just like one thing after another, they break down her personality and she goes up to the top floor and she flings herself off and kills herself, breaks herself to little pieces on the ground.
Yeah, tragic.
And this is probably where Horse Lover Fat comes into existence, where Philip K. Dick just can't deal with reality anymore. It's a little bit like when Narrator meets Marla Singer. He just is like splits in two. And
definitely split personality right here. He gets traumatized and here's a new person to address.
Yeah, so he's demarcated himself from his schizophrenic self now, who's Horse Lover Fat. And after Gloria kills herself, he goes on a dope binge, as he calls it. He can't even find enough uppers in town to buy from all the dealers, and he starts buying weed from an 18-year-old schoolgirl named Stephanie, who doesn't even sell uppers. She occasionally sells cocaine. Fat respects her because even though he doesn't respect her intellectual process, he respects that she has an intuitive process because Stephanie...
Yeah, she's emotionally intelligent in a gifted way, and that she has grace, as they say, where she just naturally can flow, that it's a godlike or an angelic thing. And she throws this pot for him on her potter's wheel. And she's only taken a few classes in high school, right? So she's by no means an artist professionally, but she makes him this special pot and it becomes a holy relic for him, which I thought was a really beautiful thing. And he keeps citing that that's like the most beautiful and healing thing that anyone's ever done for him. And he always is like, wow, she didn't even know what she did. She was just like, here's a thing I made. I hope you like it.
He names the pot Oho. And it's after this that he starts becoming obsessed with God.
Here's the funny thing, too, is that I noticed that he talks about smoking dope, doing dope, or being addicted to dope. And it's like, it's not like we would think dope is like heroin, right? It's just pot. It's like weed. And then I like how that when he gets the pot, he's just like, I have this pot. And he keeps talking about having like this like little pot.
And she's a pot dealer.
After he did a bunch of dope. And I'm like, okay, no, he was smoking weed, but now he has a clay pot. Okay, I got to remember this.
Well, Kevin makes fun of him later saying a lot of people believe God sleeps in pot.
Yeah, but he sleeps in the hash pipe that Stephanie, is that her name, gives him. Stephanie thinks that hashish and marijuana can cure everything.
She supercharges him with his hash pipe, whatever the hell that means.
Oh yeah, that means puts him like he's too mental. The way he describes horse liver fat, the way that man thinks is like at this point he's even talking about like downloading all this information directly from God, which is like you have to imagine this is some kind of like high level like crazy post-traumatic stress disorder ADHD going on.
Maybe that's what I have. Well, so Fat after some time becomes aware that God is slumbering in this clay pot, waiting to be born and reclaim the world, destroying it in the process.
Interesting note.
Sure.
When you smoke hash oil, you can recycle the refuse, which is called reclaim.
Oh, it does kind of play in.
You can re-smoke it, like, and recycle it, but it's often used, it's refuse, but you can reclaim the refuse.
So in the same way, God is supposed to destroy the world and reclaim it. And Fat says this refers to Isaiah 41:25. I have raised up one from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun shall he call upon my name, and he shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay.
Ooh, such a poet.
He said cometh like 10 times in 2 sentences.
He's a horny little guy.
Isaiah?
No, Philip. K. Dick.
Dick.
Apparently a fat dick.
He says thus, after he had encountered God, Fat developed a love for him, which was not normal. It is not what is usually meant in saying that someone, quote, loves God. With Fat, it was an actual hunger. And stranger still, he explained to us that God had injured him, and still he yearned for him, like a drunk yearns for booze. God, he told us, had fired a beam of pink light directly at him, at his head, his eyes. Fat had been temporarily blinded, and his head ached for days. It was easy, he said, to describe the beam of pink light. It's exactly what you get as a phosphine afterimage when a flashbulb has gone off in your face. Fat was spiritually haunted by that color. Sometimes it showed up on a TV screen. He lived for that light.
Oh gosh, this is also familiar.
That one particular color. However, he could never really find it again. I guess on the TVs, he just said. Nothing could generate that color for light but God. In other words, normal light did not contain that color. One time, Fat studied a color chart, a chart of visible light. The color was absent. Whoa, that proves it, Philip. You didn't see it on a color wheel? It's not real.
You see it in your head with your third eye.
I also associated my experience with this color, but I don't seem to have a visual component that's as exaggerated as other people that have mystical experiences or even practice magic. I have to practice a lot in order to visualize things or have visual phenomena.
I usually see in the range of like, he describes pink light. My pink is more like a vibrant purple and blue. Like I see the ultraviolet more, and I can see red and pink, but it's not as pronounced to me. Because I've seen this like weird vibrating blue purple. I look at the colors later and I'm like, wait, that wasn't real.
Now that we've said that horse liver fat is actually Philip K. Dick, who is horse liver fat? Horse liver fat is a re-rendering of the name Philip Dick, as Philip means lover of horses, and the second might be translated as fat in German, but more accurately, it just means big or stout. Likewise, fat represents Dick's schizophrenic side, as we said earlier, but also the believer, the one who hears and sees the messages from the being that he calls Zebra.
Sounds like a secret agent name.
Well, he thinks it's possible that it very well might be.
Blends in with the surroundings.
Yes. Part of the reason he goes over the same territory so many times is he's expounding on his different theories. Now, this is one such theory regarding Zebra. The universe might be irrational, but something rational had broken into it, like a thief in the night breaks into a sleeping household, unexpectedly in terms of place, in terms of time. Fat had seen it, not because there was anything special about him, but because it had wanted him to see it. Normally, it remained camouflaged. Normally, when it appeared, no one could distinguish it from ground. Set to ground, as Fat correctly expressed it. He had a name for it, Zebra, because it blended. The name for this was mimesis. Mary, pretty girl, you want to read the part about the mimesis?
Mimesis is a term with an undeniably classical pedigree. Originally a Greek word, it has been used in aesthetic or artistic theory to refer to the attempt to imitate or reproduce reality since Plato and Aristotle. Mimesis is derived from the Greek verb what?
Mimisthai?
Mimisthai?
It means to imitate.
And which itself comes from mimos, meaning mime. It also means the ability of some animals to fool others into believing them to be something other than they are, camouflage being a most basic example. The stick bug is capable of convincing some creature that it is a stick and not a bug or a tasty dinner.
Right.
The anglerfish convinces its prey that it's actually food before luring in to eat it. The zebra stripes, although less spectacular than the former two examples, speaks to what Philip K. Dick calls mimesis, as it is said to fool or disorient the lion's vision. Although he does note that higher functioning animals can actually see, like other species, can see through certain mimesis.
Correct. Now he's assuming
like
that
a butterfly that looks like an owl would deter birds from eating it, or even small mammals, but it doesn't work on, say, a large carnivore.
Correct. In this way, he's saying that God has a mimetic power that camouflages it to lower beings, which is everything else, or us humans.
I love this concept because there's so many parables too of not just God, but like angels or even representatives of God coming to the earth and going as like a homeless person or somebody in need, and people just like look like ignore them and stuff, and then they're punished for that in the parable. But I love that like and he's describing it like it's not even limited to just like the refuse of humans kind. It's not even limited to that. It's like it could be, you know how like you ever see that Family Guy where Peter Griffin is like talking about like that feeling you get when you see that plastic bag blowing in the wind when you're driving your car? It's like blowing in the wind behind you on the asphalt.
American Beauty. Do you want to see the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed?
And it's just like trash, like floating in the air, but like you see something very ethereal in it. It's like God can travel through any particle. It doesn't matter if it's alive or not. It doesn't have to be a human.
Perfect example. Kevin Spacey, kind of a creep, but American Beauty really touched something in me when I was a little kid. And when that character, Kevin Spacey did not touch me, but the movie did.
When you were a little kid.
Yeah, when I was 9.
Inside you?
Yes, I was watching the HBO, the scene where the bag's floating around. He's like, when I saw that, I knew that there was this whole secret world to everything. And just by noticing that, he got laid.
I mean, but you have to like give into it. You can't sit there and be like, by my calculations, it's 53.4% possible that it could happen. It's like, you can't sit there and do that.
No, like he was horse lover fat crazy.
Yeah, but that's what your schizo side wants you to do. But at the same time, you have to temper it at all times. So you have to know when to follow your intuition. You can't just like that. I made that mistake where I was like, oh, well, just because I have a feeling to do something doesn't mean I should do it. That's just dumb. I should like analyze and think about everything I do. It's like, yeah, but what if you get in a car wreck? Or like, what if someone shoves you off a boat or you fall out of an airplane and you don't know how to use a parachute? Like, what happens then? Like, I don't know. Then you need your intuition. So you can't just ignore it or like not use it. You have to use it in opportune times. Like if you're like having a good time and you're at the park and then you see a ball come towards you because some kids kicked it and it went too far. Yeah, that's a great time to just be like on the spur of the moment, and like let that intuitive side come in and just kick that ball back. Like you can do stuff like that, but don't intuitively drive off the highway at like 70 miles per hour.
Well, I want to take all these ideas and zip them up and do a bunch of little stories real quick. So let's revisit this idea that it's Lovecraft sort of flipped on its head, where instead of this being the good world and there's evil invaders from outside the world coming to invade us and make our life bad, it's sort of the opposite. It's that we live in this cruel, mechanical, deterministic Agent Smith world. And there's this invasion from outside of time that can impose itself on time and influence time and rewrite time because it is essentially irrational. For a while, Philip K. Dick really struggles with this. He talks to Dr. Stone about this. If the universe is irrational, or if God is irrational, or if the material world is irrational, which is rational, what is irrational? But the point being is that you could consider God to be the irrational one, because it is a freeing, free will giving, volitional force, whereas the material universe is like dead, cruel, and mechanical.
Right, like you could make, you know how like if you willfully make a wrong decision just to prove a point, that's not possible in a mechanical universe. Like that's directly incompatible with it. So that would mean your immediate elimination. So, I'm not for that.
Well, hold on.
But
part of what caused my freaky religious experience was just watching A Clockwork Orange and trying to get into the deeper meaning of it. And what I got out of it from the version I saw with Kubrick, who sort of circumcised the ending off and made it a little more bleak than it was meant to be, was that there's no such thing as rehabilitation. If you have rehabilitated somebody, all you've done is you've turned them into a Clockwork Orange. All you've done is you've reprogrammed them to associate what they really want to do with suffering, and so they'll act mechanically. And that it's better to just be yourself and act spontaneously and just allow the irrational to allow the inspiring force of life to animate you, rather than to allow somebody else's notion of what's right or what's good influence you. And it's kind of dark. It's dark. It's really fucking dark. But
because you're alone in this, and it's only you that's steering the wheel. My favorite euphemism for metaphor for this would be like you're alone in the dark ocean with no land in sight, and you're steering a ship. So somebody's like, go north, you should just go north. There's something up north. And you're like, okay, I could do that, but there's like a storm blowing in and you're not sure what to do and you're sailing against it. That's when it's like, okay, well, intuition is going to save your life, because you need to go with the flow of the ocean to survive. Especially if you get caught in a whirlpool, you need to know the momentum of how the water's moving in order to get out of the trap. So you're really pretty much all alone and you have no idea which direction to go. That's like the best concept I could think of.
And it's sort of irrational, the spirit of exploration, fighting against what you know is best for your survival. It takes an element of self-sacrifice, an element of the irrational to break through life and find your true self, right? This is just like a basic trope.
But I mean, think about
hero's journey type stuff.
Being there on the water and not seeing land forever, you would have to have faith in yourself to be like, okay, we're going to keep going this direction until we see something. You have to stay on that course. And the only person you have to trust is yourself. There's nothing else there except for the water, and however it churns, you have to kind of go with it.
Like the first monkey being shot into space.
You're at the mercy of the universe, and it's tossing and turning every which way, and you really have no option except to go with it and use it to your advantage as much as possible. Like if the water tosses to the left side, then you better believe you're turning your rudders that way too, so it'll throw you in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, if your car's in a spin, turn the wheel into the spin and you can like get out of the spin. The spin being the cycle of time and the straight direction being one's will, I guess. Anyway.
Or a manipulated will, if someone's telling you to go a certain direction, but it's a better course to swerve whichever direction the water goes, then you should follow the path that you think is better.
Ultimately, you must do as you feel is right. I think there's a reasoning behind Horse Lover Fat naming the Logos or Saint Sophia zebra. Now, He refers to Zebra, or whatever it's called, performing some sort of mimesis to hide from the material universe, which is conceptualized as the Demiurge, the cruel, blind, occluded creator god that the, quote, secret Christians have come to invade and subterfuge. These are apt symbols for various reasons. To use the word again, there is a mimetic similarity between horse and zebra. Is horse lover also by default a zebra lover? In so much as horse lover Fat sees time and the material universe as the evil, occluded demiurge Yaldabaoth, commonly depicted as a serpent with a lion's head, the image of the bedazzling zebra escaping its jaws begins to make some sense. After all, we learned in the Hypostasis of the Archons that Sophia confounds and bedazzles the abortive, accidentally created demiurge with a cloud of disorienting Barbie sparkles, the very thing which a lion is supposed to be deluded into seeing instead of each individual zebra as it approaches its prey. Pretty good, Philip.
He also talks about the divine twins later and the dualistic purpose of being in this physical reality in which the demiurge rules over. So zebra is a trap. It's an idealization, but what he's not realizing is that he's using both negative and positive, and the black and white stripes both represent those things. So while he's being completely skeptical, what would help him is something that's more balanced. That's why he's going towards this zebra archetype, is that he's trying to balance his dark side with his light side, which in this respect, this would be camouflaging in that, you know, it can be apparent in anything that he goes towards, like any process that would balance him.
I agree wholeheartedly, because that opens the conversation about Theodicy. The idea that if God is eternally good and just and all-knowing and all-powerful, how could God allow evil to exist? In fact, they talk about this in the book quite a bit. Fat sits around with his friends, especially Kevin, who can't seem...
I was about to bring up.
Yeah, he can't get over his dead cat. Can't get over it.
And but he, every time, like, they're all trying to talk about these like high theosophical arguments of like, what would you argue to God if you saw him? Like, prove to me this. Like, why is this so? Like, why is this person dying of cancer if you're so good? And like, apparently Kevin is just like hung up on the fact that his cat got hit by a car. And it was like, why couldn't it have been like 2 seconds after? Like, that's when I realized there was no God. And like, they all kind of made fun of him for it, that he would bring up a cat to God. But in the end, it's like, what if you're judging yourself in the end? And what if that's good enough for Kevin?
I'm going to have to think about that, but I don't hold anything against Kevin like his friends do. They say about him almost as if he's not there. They say, for him, the cat is a symbol of everything about the universe that he doesn't understand. Kevin pipes up, I understand just fine. I think it's fuck. God is either powerless or stupid. He's evil, dumb, and weak, he says in response.
They argue is paradoxical, because that's not real, but if it is, it's stupid. You know that, but if you're saying, you're arguing that it's not real, but you just admitted if it is real, then it's stupid. Then you're just being like, it's dumb. So it's a weak argument, and he calls God weak, which he's arguing against the, I guess I would call them at least agnostics, Fat and his friends.
I'd say they're agnostics that definitely lean towards a Christian upbringing.
They're not atheists, but they're not thinking of it in the same way. Like, I get it. Kevin is saying God should answer to him and his pet cat personally.
Part of the reason they care so much is that they all fell for the drug craze in the 60s. And at some point, Philip K. Dick actually met Timothy Leary and became really disillusioned with the whole drug scene. Likewise, his friends as well. I guess because he experienced some moderate success, his friends kind of gave a shit about what he thought. And so it set this groundwork where he had these friends that had these trippy psychedelic ideas, but they had kind of given up on the, quote, dope scene or the drug scene and could only really like enjoy it, you know, passively now. They couldn't, you know, and they felt like theology was their route. It was like the cool hip thing for them now. It was like, if we're gonna approach the mysteries, we got to do it through like Jesus and theology and the Bible. And Philip's like our author friend, and he knows what he's talking about. And they would get together and they just argue, you know?
Yeah, but he was so. I feel like he put that feeling into words better than anyone I've ever read.
Kevin?
Like, no. Like when Philip writes about that feeling of knowing, like, how God is the plasmoid being that, like, is basically a symbiotic parasite on the human species, and that you can channel it at any given time. Like when he gets into that shit, I'm like, yes, okay, I'm starting to understand what you're saying. Or like how he's saying here that like how they laughed at Kevin, but later they realized that, oh, well, you know, you pretty much face yourself. Like, as long as you're righteous in your own eyes, they realize that that's much who judges you. It's not, God is not external from you. God is actually inside of you and has permeated you. And as he put it, it's pretty much infected you.
And a huge part of the exegesis is like, well, I met God. And this is the thing, is when he met Zebra, he gave him accurate information about his son's hernia, which had gone undiagnosed for his whole life and could have killed him in his sleep at any moment. And he tells the doctor in detail what Zebra told him about his son's medical condition. And he hadn't been acting too crazy yet, so it didn't really draw anyone's attention, but he basically read out for the doctor exactly what was wrong with his son. They fixed his hernia. He had been behaving poorly his whole life because he was always in pain.
Well, he was in pain, yeah. He was in constant pain, and nobody knew why, because he was too young for you to see the hernia.
So there are plenty of times in Philip K. Dick's life where he's like, I wouldn't even experience this as positive at all unless it had saved my son's life. That's partially why I cling to this even being a positive thing. God is terrifying and fascinating simultaneously, in Philip K. Dick's own words.
I don't know if you want to get to this point, but he talks about the second girl he's with. Is it Sherry or Stacy or something?
Sherry,
and she's dying of cancer, and help her so. And he realizes that he's infatuated with death. And it kind of leads into that. Like, in one way, following your intuition can help save your son, right? It can help you intuit where the disease is and like where to tell the doctor to look. But at the time, because you want to help people and you want to like be of service to other people, then you might find yourself servicing a black hole, a spiritual black hole of a person.
Well, I think this is why Philip K. Dick might be partially canceled now, is because he does speak so grimmily of a lot of the women in his tales here, but he susses it out in a philosophical way where I think some people might not find that.
Well, if he's a straight man, then his experiences are going to be with women. But if you could think about, okay, use your imagination. If it were a woman like hanging out with guys, there could be similar guys that have these same emotional pits for personality.
Oh yeah, those guys that always need to be propped up, that like constantly are angry and upset, and so you could flip the genders and it would make sense. So we could you have
to use your imagination. Just because someone that wrote it, they're writing it from their perspective, and please understand that it doesn't disrespect the opposite side at all. But if you're an extreme in one way, like this woman was, oh, woe is me, I'm sick. The best thing that ever happened to me is I got cancer because then people cared about me. Literally what she said. And, you know, that could be just as disgusting as someone just like, I'm the biggest and I'm the best and I'm going to punch anyone that says otherwise. It could be just as bad as somebody like that. Like, it doesn't have to be the same thing.
Well, a big problem with Philip K. Dick's life is helping people. It's something that his therapists have always told him to stop doing, because he becomes involved with people that abuse him and use him, because he's right. He's passive, and he's trying to create these weird ideal situations where like what this lady we're talking about, she gets cancer. She's the only one who visited him in the psych ward after he tried to kill himself. And so he says, oh, she must be the one for me. And so he's like, I'm going to take care of her. And when her cancer comes back, I'm going to help her die. And it's all going to be love. And the whole time she just like walks all over him and treats him like shit.
He kept loving her. And she even worked at a church, and she would come home and bitch and curse about other people that worked with her at church. And she talked about wanting to fuck the priest and stuff. And it was like disgusting that he would like tolerate that. He even like locked himself in a room so that he could write, you know, when he was around her, but he still like loved her, and he was there when she was sick. and he took care of her. And when she moved out, she got worse and she got sicker. And then that's when she died, and nobody would check on her. Like, he went to the church and asked for them to check on her like at least 3 times in the book. And the priest is like, yeah, I'll do that. And nobody checked on her. Like, he really cared, but he cared too much. And it showed how flawed that is. Like, that is such a holy and wholesome and like morally good thing to do and to feel. But he's showing how toxic and bad it can be if you lock on to somebody it's a succubus, dude. Like, it just take more and more and more and more and more. And it's not enough.
Well, he's a bit of a simp, all right? He's a huge, enormous simp.
Yeah, but he called other people simps too, which is like hilarious to me.
Okay, but in Sherry's defense, he really did go crazy, and he explains exactly how it happened. In fact, he was screwing around with a dose of vitamins that he gleaned from an article about treating schizophrenics. And the idea is that you take super doses of water-soluble vitamins, and it's supposed to overclock your brain. And in some cases, it causes some people to temporarily pop out of their schizophrenia. This is something I've heard anecdotally from people that are in medicine, although I don't think it's regularly practiced. It's something that has been experimented with. Well, anyway, Dick was experimenting with this kind of thing. And while he was doing research on a scanner darkly, he found out that your brain is able to transduce different kinds of fields of energy if the energy was of sufficiently low heat. So if it didn't fry your brain, I guess. And so he began to consciously block out what civilization normally considers signal, like television and radio, the Whole Rabbit podcast, and began tuning into and exposing himself to natural sounds, or what civilization usually calls noise. He calls these the weak, natural electrical fields. Well, one night he found himself, quote, flooded with graphics or flashes of imagery that, as far as he could tell, was of beauteous living origin. It was artsy and vivid. This went on for 8 hours. More and more and more, it continued into his sleep, resulting in strings of numbers, images, information, seemingly random in quality. Dick noticed that he found himself acting strangely with an unusual abundance of energy. I can really fucking relate to this. When I went through my Enthusiasmos, it was like I was rolling all the time.
Yeah.
He felt this probably had something to do with the GABA levels in his brain and how they affect what we call inhibition. Dick also had the subjective sense of information flowing downward from the sky and thought it was the same stuff that filled animals with instinct and humans with their dreams. An evolutionary flow of life itself trickling down from above. We talk the fuck out of this. Some of our more recent episodes, and it relates to that exact thing is Atu 18 tarot card, the moon. Those little yods that are falling down from heaven, that's what he's describing. But
he's going crazy, but it's patterned. It's ritual. It's for a reason. It's chaos.
You said it's patterned. That makes so much sense because in the tarot, that's how it's portrayed. It's portrayed as like these patterns and cycles. Wow, that makes so much sense, Mari.
You need to do it. Cycle. And that's what I really enjoy, the way that he explains this. It's not that he's going crazy, it's that there's an expression, there's this deep spiritual expression that has to get out of us. And the information and the industrial age has stifled it for a long time. And I'm sorry that people that are atheists that don't believe that there's anything beyond physical matter, I mean, I really think they're mistaken, because you're stifling something and you're going to experience it in one way or another. And I love the way that he describes it, because it becomes an overstimulation at some point, and it doesn't matter what it is, but it will encompass you once you realize.
God can be good and terrible, not in succession, but at the same time. The gentle sounds of the choir singing, Amen, Amen, are not to calm the congregation, but to pacify the god. When you know this, you have penetrated to the innermost core of religion. And the worst part is that God can thrust himself outward and into the congregation until he becomes them. You worship a god, then he pays you back by taking you over. This is called Enthusiasmos in Greek. Literally, to be possessed by the god. Of all the Greek gods, one most likely to do this was Dionysus. And unfortunately, Dionysus was insane. If you try to run, he has you. Anyhow, for the demigod Pan was the basis of panic, which is the uncontrollable urge to flee. So in trying to flee from Dionysus, you got taken over anyhow.
Yeah, it's a passionate. Pan is also associated with naiads and dryads and fevered dancing in the forest until you're exhausted and you expire and you get drunk or whatever. Because Pan is like the god and Dionysus, the god of wine. So it's overindulgence, like a fevered frenzy, like a religious frenzy, which I would relate to like monthly bonfires like indigenous peoples would have on the full moon, or pagans usually do ritual on the full moon.
Yes, part of that is to harness this energy in nature, but the Greeks and others have noticed that when this energy, which is enormous and connected to what everything, hits you, you go mad. And it feels like panic, but it also feels like excitement. It has a dual nature to it. We can look at Dionysus, the god of wine, and they would go into a holy state of Bacchus, where they'd they drink and dance and fuck and have orgies, and that was seen as the consciousness of nature. Nature sort of does, it just grows, and we actually discussed this in our astral light video, how the light of Tifereth is split in Netzach, and this green energy of Netzach is that romantic energy to want to like combine with another. It's sensuous and it's fiery and it's hot.
Yes.
It's sexual.
But it's a spiritual sexual. Like it's a higher dimension of that you want to combine with someone's energy.
It's because it's creative. It's essentially creative.
Right. But yeah.
So it makes some sense that if you were to become possessed of the life force, you would lose like all your inhibitions, right? There's some truth to that.
Extent.
Like even in, I don't know if this is considered a normie religion, right? But like the Pentecostals, like to be able to speak in tongues, you have to let go of your inhibitions. Otherwise the Holy Spirit, won't come to you and you won't speak in tongues. It's like
the snake people, the people that speak in tongues. They lose all inhibition, but they're also, I believe, having an audience there that are like cheering and praying behind you actually adds to it. I don't think if you did that in a room with like 3 people.
I don't know, because there's some overlap between what Dick talks about with the early Christians and this state of mind. In the Bible, they talk about being possessed of the Holy Spirit and having specifically the tongues of flame come upon you, where you become so filled with the Holy Spirit that you're able to translate the wisdom of the Holy Spirit into any language of the world, or into anyone who's in front of you. You're able to speak the language of the Holy Spirit to that person.
That's why I'm Gnostic.
So
Gnostic has no language.
Well, also the idea that you're saved because of your connection to Christ, not because you're following all the correct laws, is a bit revolutionary and against the idea of the times and of the state, and it's inherently revolutionary that you're not bound by any external authority, right? The whole, and that you can follow the quote gospel or the good news, like one's inner. You can be an orange instead of a clockwork orange.
God, yes, you could be an agent of God yourself. You don't have to wait to be an angel in your next life. You could do it now at the cost of $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Call now.
It only costs you $5 to get the extended show, which you can get at www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit. And I'll get you 2 stickers. You get access to our Discord server where you can talk all your crazy thoughts about Philip K. Dick and a bunch of other things too. So is there anything else we want to talk about in the free show before we open up and get really, really, really personal about our own personal delusions that happened when we met God? Because there are some synchronicities between what happened to Philip K. Dick and what my experience was of Sophia, and I would like to get into that in the second half of the show, where the greater mass of people won't be able to hear all my crazy, like, this is crazier than my crazy bullshit. So like, you're gonna have to pay me $5 to hear it. Now you have to read his Exegesis, or more mercifully V.A.L.I.S, to get the full story, because he goes over it 6 or 7 different ways and times. Now, he already told you that he was messing around with water soluble vitamins, so presumably certain amounts of B12 and vitamin C in big doses, right? Stuff like that overclock his brain. But he also said he had surgery and they administered sodium pentothal.
Oh no, the downers, the Debbie Downers.
I don't really know anything about sodium pentothal, but I've heard it referred to as a truth serum or a truth drug.
Anesthesia. Yes, it is a truth serum. Yes.
It's a barbiturate. It would be similar to a benzodiazepine in a lot of ways.
But it's kind of like, you know how Xanax makes you drunk, but also you do stuff and you don't remember it?
No, I don't really. I haven't really experimented with too many pills in my life, to be honest.
Okay, yo, dingus, what's Xanax? Is that like a barbiturate or is it like a down? Is it a downer for sure?
So both barbiturates and benzodiazepines were downers. The way that you can think of a barbiturate is the Xanax before Xanax. They're more dangerous.
Okay, so it's a precursor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Xanax just delivers the Gucci to your smoochie.
I mean, I guess if you're into that kind of thing.
I mean, I'm not. That shit at all.
Well, Philip K. Dick was into uppers. He really wasn't into this sort of thing.
Me too. But I'm also the hash queen, like Stephanie.
Yeah, you are. Well, so am I. I'm the hash queen, that's for sure.
Ooh.
He's got these water-soluble vitamins on board. He just had surgery. He has this clay pot. He's already become obsessed with God. He's written like psychedelic novels. He's what is it? I forget who it was. The person who delivered his meds
and delivered his it's like a painkiller that he got from the pharmacist for something that he got surgery, right?
And what did she have on?
She had the Jesus cross. She was wearing that, and she was a dark-haired, beautiful maiden with his drugs, and he like flipped out and tripped out to another universe, in another time, in another place, in another time, and he was like this Gnostic dude named what Timothy or something.
Oh, that's right, because it puts him in contact with an alternative Philip K. Dick in an alternative timeline where he's like some Gnostic,
past life, quote unquote, past life.
He's basically a Gnostic superhero vis-a-vis the Matrix, who goes and is trying to fight against the machines.
I knew guys that needed Jesus. I did. Let me tell you about him.
And so by just glimpsing this Jesus fish, it activates this hidden secret Christian inside of him.
And he claimed this was what Jesus taught immortality was. This is a trick and Gnostics figured it out, that you can program your current psyche with these symbols and this ritual, that they would take a pink colored food, which is related to the pink colored light. And,
yes.
And then they would drink, it was some kind of like water out of a certain chalice. And in the movie that they reference, that this is named after.
Well, because there's a movie that comes out and they go full Luke watching Apocalypse Now, and they're like, "Oh my God, this movie's about my life. Look, I can prove it to my friends."
The ritual is related to that, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if you do all this, apparently you can like see your past lives or get in tune. It basically causes a ripple in a pond effect and causes a resonance. If they incarnate in any physical body in the forward timeline, as soon as that physical entity sees this symbol, they will immediately trance back into the previous personality. This is some schizoid stuff. So this explains why people think that they're Jesus or maybe Napoleon and try to take over the world. I mean, that could be a thing, that maybe certain people are possessed or they become avatars for certain spirits they've learned this trick to immortality. So I would believe that.
The name that he associated with this power that I could find nowhere on Google, that only I could find from Philip K. Dick, was Bidu Haka, which I thought was an interesting name, which is the ability to see your past lives and your future lives. And that this vision was like the vision of the Buddha, like you said. And that if you were
about to remember.
So
he's always being told to remember in his visions.
So to butter you up for the extended show, which I do want you to subscribe to here, I had a similar delusion that I had become superimposed with a dead superhero of mine. And I've never, prior to that or since then, had that belief / delusion / knowledge. I don't just find any hero I like, because I have lots of heroes, but I don't go like, oh, I'm a reincarnation of that person. I'm a reincarnation of that person. This person, Jack Parsons, I became utterly and totally, completely convinced that I was a reincarnation. And I don't mean that in the sense that like I'm I am imbued with all of his good qualities or that I'm going to ever be as successful as he was. But there was something about my experience with quote unquote zebra that convinced me that I had been living my life and making the same mistakes that Jack Parsons made because I was trying to reconnect with his spirit. And if you'd like to hear more about what
Wait, I have a cool thing too.
well, don't you want to make people pay for it to hear the rest?
Yeah, but I want to tease them too.
Okay, well, go ahead and tease him, Maury. Go ahead.
There was some other stuff that Fat Dick was talking about.
What did Fat Dick talk about, Maury?
Also, the DNA and gene pool component of this is that you could also be very well channeling a ancestral spirit, and that we also take on the traumas of our predecessors, so our parents and our grandparents. I believe that I am carrying the will and the spirit of my great grandmother, who I am named after, and I did not like her name, but now that I know who she is, like, I accept it. It's pretty interesting how this lines up with that too, because he talks about how DNA, your inheritance, and the gene pool, and where your blood comes from, also directly and basically affects how you can channel this kind of energy.
You know, I've heard the most magical day to be born as a witch is on your mother's birthday.
Not me.
Well, it operates on the same principle. I'm encouraging your story.
Well, I'll have to figure that out, but I don't think she was born on my day, but we're named the same and we do the same thing.
You mean eat carrots and shoot lasers?